Hey, language enthusiasts, have you ever wished you could capture the magic of sound in words? In today's video, we're diving into a treasure trove of sensory words related to sound. This is your ultimate guide to enhancing your vocabulary and making your speech sound extra impressive. We'll break down each word, provide precise definitions, and offer example sentences to make learning these words a breeze. Get ready to add a splash of sophistication to your speaking skills. Banging. Making a loud, explosive noise. The door swung shut with a loud banging sound. The hammering was banging through the night. The banging of fireworks echoed across the valley. Barking. The sound a dog makes. The dog was barking furiously at the stranger. The barking of the neighborhood dogs kept me awake. The barking grew louder as I approached the gate. Bawling. Crying loudly. The baby started bawling as soon as her mother left. He was bawling like a child who lost his favorite toy. The actor was bawling on stage during the emotional scene. Beating. Hitting repeatedly with force. The drums were beating in a steady rhythm. His heart was beating so loudly he thought it would burst. The soldiers' beating boots echoed through the courtyard. Belching. Emitting gas noisily from the stomach through the mouth. The man let out a loud belching sound after drinking soda. The old car was belching smoke as it climbed the hill. The volcano was belching ash and smoke into the sky. Bellowing. Emitting a deep, loud roar. The wounded animal was bellowing in pain. The boss was bellowing orders across the office. The foghorn was bellowing through the dense mist. Blaring. Making a loud, harsh noise. The speakers were blaring music at the party. The sirens were blaring as the fire truck sped by. The alarm clock was blaring in the early morning. Blasting. Producing a sudden, loud noise or explosion. The rock band was blasting their hit song on stage. The explosion was blasting debris in all directions. The radio was blasting news updates non-stop. Bleating. Making a wavering cry, typically used for sheep. The sheep were bleating in the meadow. The lamb's bleating grew louder as it looked for its mother. The distant bleating of goats echoed across the hillside. Boisterous. Noisy, energetic, and cheerful. The kids were boisterous as they played in the park. The boisterous crowd filled the stadium with excitement. The boisterous laughter of friends echoed in the room. Booming. Making a loud, deep, and resonant sound. His voice was booming as he gave the speech. The booming thunder shook the windows. The booming bass in the club made the floor vibrate. Blustering. Talking in a loud, aggressive, or indignant way. The politician was blustering during the debate. The wind was blustering through the narrow streets. His blustering tone made everyone uneasy. Brash. Self-assertive in a rude, noisy, or overbearing way. Her brash comments shocked everyone at the meeting. The brash salesman wouldn't take no for an answer. His brash behavior alienated his colleagues. Burping. Emitting gas noisily from the stomach through the mouth. After drinking soda, he couldn't stop burping. The baby let out a small burping sound after feeding. The loud burping at the table was embarrassing. Bursting. Breaking open or apart suddenly and violently. The balloon went bursting with a loud pop. The dam was bursting under the pressure of the water. The firecracker bursting in the night sky was dazzling. Buzzing. Making a low, continuous humming sound. The bees were buzzing around the flowers. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. The city was buzzing with excitement during the festival. Cacophony. A harsh, discordant mixture of sounds. The city street was filled with a cacophony of noises. The cacophony of alarms and sirens was overwhelming. The classroom erupted in a cacophony of voices. Chattering. Talking rapidly or incessantly. The students were chattering excitedly before the exam. The birds were chattering in the trees above. She was chattering away about her weekend plans. Cheering. Shouting for joy or in support. The fans were cheering as their team scored a goal. The crowd was cheering loudly at the concert. The children were cheering when they saw the magician. Chiming. Making a clear, ringing sound. The clock was chiming 12 as we entered the hall. The wind chimes were chiming softly in the breeze. The church bells were chiming in the distance. Chirping. Making a short, sharp sound, typically used for small birds or insects. The birds were chirping merrily at dawn. I could hear crickets chirping in the night. The chirping of sparrows filled the air with melody. Clamoring. Shouting loudly and insistently. The protesters were clamoring for justice. The children were clamoring for ice cream. The fans were clamoring to get a glimpse of the celebrity. Clanging. Making a loud, resonant metallic sound. The clanging of the blacksmith's hammer echoed in the forge. The old gate closed with a loud clanging noise. The clanging of pots and pans woke me up. Clapping. Striking the palms of the hands together repeatedly. The audience was clapping enthusiastically after the performance. The children were clapping to the rhythm of the song. The sound of clapping filled the room as she entered. Clicking. Making a short, sharp sound. He was clicking the pen nervously. The camera was clicking as she took photos. The keys on the keyboard were clicking rapidly. Clinking. Making a light, sharp ringing sound. The glasses were clinking as they toasted. The coins were clinking in his pocket. The sound of clinking chains echoed in the dungeon. Commotion. A state of confused and noisy disturbance. There was a commotion in the hallway as the students rushed out. The sudden commotion startled the birds. The party ended in a commotion when the fire alarm went off. Cooing. Making a soft murmuring sound, typically used for pigeons or people speaking softly. The pigeons were cooing on the rooftop. She was cooing sweetly to her baby. The couple was cooing to each other in the corner. Coughing. Expelling air from the lungs with a sudden sharp sound. He was coughing loudly due to the cold. The sound of coughing echoed in the quiet room. She couldn't stop coughing after inhaling the smoke. Crackling. Making a series of small, sharp sounds. The fire was crackling in the hearth, warming the room. The leaves were crackling underfoot as I walked through the forest. The radio emitted a crackling sound before the voice came through. Crashing. Making a loud, destructive sound. The waves were crashing against the rocks. The vase fell, crashing to the floor and shattering. The thunder was crashing through the night sky. Croaking. Making a deep, harsh sound, typically used for frogs. The frogs were croaking loudly in the pond. The old man's voice was croaking from disuse. The croaking sound of the raven echoed in the stillness. Crunching. Making a crisp, crushing sound. The gravel was crunching under my boots. She was crunching on a fresh apple. The snow was crunching beneath their feet as they walked. Crying. Shedding tears and making sad sounds. The baby was crying for her mother. She couldn't stop crying after hearing the sad news. The sound of crying filled the empty house. Deafening. Extremely loud and overwhelming. The concert was so loud it was deafening. The deafening roar of the engine filled the air. The explosion created a deafening noise that echoed for miles. Drawl. Speaking in a slow, lazy way with prolonged vowel sounds. He spoke with a southern drawl that was charming. Her voice had a lazy drawl that made her words stretch out. The cowboy's drawl was unmistakable in the quiet bar. Dripping. Falling in drops. Water was dripping from the leaky faucet. The rain was dripping from the eaves of the house. Blood was dripping from the wound onto the floor. Discord. Lack of harmony between sounds or people. The band's instruments created a discord that was jarring. There was a sense of discord in the meeting room. The discord between their voices was unpleasant to hear. Droning. Making a low, continuous monotonous sound. The professor's lecture was droning on and on. The bees were droning around the hive. The air conditioning unit was droning in the background. Dulcet. Sweet and soothing, especially of sound. The dulcet tones of her voice calmed the anxious child. The dulcet melody of the harp filled the room with serenity. The dulcet sounds of the river flowing were mesmerizing. Euphonious. Pleasing to the ear. The euphonious harmonies of the choir enchanted the audience. The euphonious notes of the flute drifted through the air. Her speech was so euphonious that everyone listened intently. Exploding. Bursting with a loud noise. The fireworks were exploding in the night sky with vibrant colors. The volcano was exploding, sending ash and lava everywhere. The balloon burst, exploding with a loud pop. Faint. Barely perceptible. She heard a faint whisper in the distance. The faint scent of flowers lingered in the air. The light was so faint that it barely illuminated the path. Fizzing. Making a hissing or bubbling sound. The soda was fizzing as she poured it into the glass. The bath bomb was fizzing as it dissolved in the water. The champagne was fizzing as it was poured into the flute. Gagging. Making a retching or choking sound. The foul smell had everyone gagging in disgust. He was gagging after accidentally swallowing a bug. The taste of the medicine had him gagging. Gasping. Inhaling suddenly with the mouth open, out of pain or astonishment. She was gasping for air after the long run. They were gasping in shock at the magician's trick. The sudden news left everyone gasping in disbelief. Giggling. Laughing lightly and repeatedly in a silly way. The children were giggling at the funny clown. She couldn't stop giggling during the comedy show. Their secret joke had them giggling all afternoon. Grating. Making an unpleasant rasping sound. The sound of nails on the chalkboard was grating to their ears. The rusty gate opened with a grating noise. The grating sound of metal scraping against metal was unbearable. Growling. Making a low, guttural sound, typically in anger. The dog was growling at the stranger approaching the house. His stomach was growling loudly, indicating his hunger. The distant thunder was growling as the storm approached. Grunting. Making a low, guttural sound. The weightlifter was grunting with effort as he lifted the barbell. The pig was grunting contentedly in its pen. She was grunting in frustration as she tried to move the heavy furniture. Guffaw. A loud and boisterous laugh. He let out a loud guffaw at the comedian's joke. Her unexpected guffaw made everyone else start laughing too. The room echoed with his hearty guffaw. Gurgling. Making a hollow bubbling sound. The stream was gurgling softly as it flowed over the rocks. The baby was gurgling happily in its crib. The pipes were gurgling as water passed through them. Gushing. Flowing out in a rapid and plentiful stream. Water was gushing from the broken pipe. The journalist was gushing with praise for the new book. Blood was gushing from the wound. Harmonic. Relating to harmony or making a pleasing combination of sounds. The choir's harmonic voices created a beautiful melody. The harmonic blend of the instruments was mesmerizing. The harmonic sound of the wind chimes was soothing. Hissing. Making a sharp sibilant sound. The snake was hissing as it slithered through the grass. The gas was hissing as it escaped from the pipe. She was hissing in anger at the rude comment. Honking. Making a loud, harsh sound. The cars were honking in the traffic jam. The geese were honking as they flew overhead. He was honking the horn to get his friend's attention. Howling. Making a long, loud, doleful cry or wailing sound. The wolves were howling at the moon. The wind was howling through the trees. He was howling in pain after the injury. Hubbub. A chaotic din caused by a crowd of people. The marketplace was full of hubbub as vendors shouted and people bargained. The announcement caused a hubbub among the students. There was a hubbub of excitement at the concert. Humming. Making a low, steady continuous sound. She was humming her favorite tune while cooking. The fridge was humming quietly in the background. The bees were humming around the flowers. Hushing. Making someone or something quiet. She was hushing the baby to sleep. The librarian was hushing the noisy students. The sound of the wind was hushing through the trees. Inaudible. Unable to be heard. His whisper was inaudible over the loud music. The conversation in the distance was inaudible to us. The dog's quiet whine was almost inaudible. Jangling. Making a discordant ringing sound. The keys were jangling in his pocket as he walked. The old wind chime was jangling in the breeze. The coins jangling in the jar made a harsh noise. Jingling. Making a light, ringing sound. The bells were jingling on the shop door. The reindeer's harness was jingling as it moved. The jingling of her bracelets could be heard as she danced. Lamenting. Expressing sorrow or regret. He was lamenting the loss of his old friend. The poet was lamenting the fleeting nature of time. She spent the night lamenting her missed opportunity. Laughing. Making spontaneous sounds of amusement. The children were laughing at the clown's antics. She couldn't stop laughing at the joke. His contagious laughing filled the room with joy. Lyrical. Expressing the writer's emotions in an imaginative way. Her writing was lyrical, filled with vivid imagery. The dancer's movements were lyrical and graceful. His speech was lyrical, captivating the audience. Murmur. A soft, indistinct sound made by a person or group of people speaking quietly. The crowd's murmur grew louder as the debate continued. She spoke in a murmur, almost inaudible to those around. The forest was alive with the murmur of wildlife. Mellow. Pleasantly smooth or soft, free from harshness. The wine had a mellow flavor that lingered on the palate. His voice was mellow, calming those who heard it. The sunset cast a mellow glow over the landscape. Melodious. Producing or having a pleasant tune. The melodious notes of the piano filled the room. Her singing was so melodious that it silenced the crowd. The brook's melodious gurgling was soothing to the ears. Moaning. Making a long, low sound expressing physical or mental suffering. She was moaning in pain after the injury. The wind was moaning through the abandoned house. He lay on the ground, moaning softly. Mooing. The sound that a cow makes. The cows were mooing loudly in the barn. I could hear mooing from the fields as I walked by. The mooing of the herd echoed across the valley. Mumbling. Speaking indistinctly in a low voice. He was mumbling something under his breath. The professor's mumbling made it hard to understand the lecture. She kept mumbling to herself as she worked. Muttering. Speaking in a low or barely audible voice, often in discontent. He was muttering complaints as he left the room. She kept muttering under her breath about the unfairness of it all. The audience was muttering in disapproval. Musical. Relating to or having the quality of music. The musical notes of the piano filled the air. Her musical laughter was infectious. The wind created a musical sound as it passed through the trees. Muted. Softened or muffled sound. The muted conversation in the next room was barely audible. The colors in the painting were muted, giving it a serene feel. The orchestra played a muted melody. Noisy. Making a lot of noise. The noisy children were playing in the yard. The noisy traffic made it hard to concentrate. The noisy party continued late into the night. Outcry. A strong expression of public disapproval or anger. There was a public outcry against the new law. The decision caused an outcry among the citizens. The scandal led to a nationwide outcry. Pandemonium. Wild and noisy disorder or confusion, uproar. The classroom descended into pandemonium when the teacher left. There was pandemonium in the streets after the announcement. The party turned into pandemonium when the music stopped. Patter. A repeated light tapping sound. The patter of raindrops on the window was soothing. I could hear the patter of little feet running down the hallway. The patter of hail on the roof grew louder. Peaceful. Free from disturbance, tranquil. The lake was peaceful, with not a ripple on its surface. She felt peaceful sitting by the garden, listening to the birds. The peaceful village was a perfect retreat from the city. Pealing. A loud ringing of a bell or bells. The church bells were pealing joyfully on the wedding day. The pealing of the bells signaled the end of the ceremony. The pealing bells could be heard throughout the town. Peeping. Making a high-pitched sound, especially of young birds. The chicks were peeping in the nest, waiting for their mother. I heard peeping from the bushes and found a nest of birds. The peeping of the baby birds was constant and loud. Piercing. A sound that is very high, loud, and unpleasant. The piercing scream of the alarm clock jolted me awake. Her piercing voice cut through the noisy room. The piercing whistle could be heard from miles away. Pinging. Making a high-pitched, short, sharp sound. The microwave pinging announced the meal was ready. I heard the pinging of my phone as messages came in. The pinging sound of the sonar echoed through the room. Placid. Not easily upset or excited, calm and peaceful. The placid waters of the lake reflected the sky perfectly. Her placid demeanor calmed everyone in the room. The placid expression on his face showed he was at peace. Plopping. Making a sound as of something dropped heavily. The raindrops were plopping into the puddles. She dropped the book, and it landed with a plopping sound. The stone made a plopping noise as it fell into the water. Popping. Making a short, sharp, explosive sound. The corn was popping in the microwave. The balloons were popping one by one. The fireworks were popping in the night sky. Quacking. The sound a duck makes. The ducks were quacking loudly at the pond. I could hear the quacking of ducks as I approached the water. The quacking sound was unmistakable in the quiet morning. Racket. A loud, unpleasant noise. The construction site was filled with a constant racket. The kids made such a racket that I couldn't concentrate. The neighbor's party created a racket that lasted all night. Rapping. Making a series of quick, sharp taps or knocks. She was rapping on the door impatiently. The detective heard a rapping at the window late at night. The woodpecker was rapping on the tree trunk. Rasping. Making a harsh, grating sound. His voice was rasping from a bad cold. The file made a rasping sound against the metal. The rasping of the saw against the wood was loud. Rattling. Making a series of short, sharp knocking sounds. The windows were rattling in the strong wind. The old car was rattling as it drove down the bumpy road. The rattling of chains echoed through the dungeon. Rhythmic. Having a regular, repeated pattern of sounds or movements. The drummer's rhythmic beat set the pace for the dancers. The rhythmic sound of the train was soothing. Her footsteps were rhythmic as she walked down the hall. Ringing. Making a clear, resonant sound. The telephone was ringing loudly in the empty office. The church bells were ringing across the town. Her laughter was ringing through the air. Ripping. Tearing or pulling apart with force. The fabric was ripping as she pulled it apart. The sound of paper ripping filled the room. He felt his heart ripping in two. Rowdy. Noisy and disorderly. The bar was filled with rowdy patrons. The rowdy children were running around the playground. The party turned rowdy as the night went on. Rumbling. Making a continuous deep, resonant sound. Thunder was rumbling in the distance. His stomach was rumbling from hunger. The rumbling of the earthquake shook the ground. Rustling. Making a soft, muffled crackling sound. The leaves were rustling in the breeze. She heard a rustling in the bushes behind her. The rustling of paper could be heard in the quiet room. Scratching. Making a harsh, grating noise by scraping. The cat was scratching at the door to be let in. The sound of nails scratching on the chalkboard was unbearable. He was scratching his head in confusion. Screaming. Making a loud, high-pitched sound. She was screaming in terror as the roller coaster dropped. The sirens were screaming through the city streets. The child was screaming for help in the crowded mall. Screeching. Making a harsh, high-pitched sound. The car tires were screeching as it came to a halt. The owl was screeching in the dead of night. The brake screeching made everyone on the bus look up. Serene. Calm, peaceful, and untroubled. The lake was serene in the early morning light. Her serene smile put everyone at ease. The serene landscape was like a painting. Singing. Making musical sounds with the voice. The choir was singing harmoniously in the church. She was singing her favorite song in the shower. The birds were singing melodiously at dawn. Slamming. Closing with great force and noise. He was slamming the door in anger. The book hit the table with a slamming sound. The windows were slamming shut due to the wind. Shouting. Speaking loudly and forcefully. The coach was shouting instructions from the sidelines. The market vendor was shouting to attract customers. They were shouting to be heard over the noise of the crowd. Silent. Not making or accompanied by any sound. The room fell silent when the announcement was made. The forest was silent, not even a whisper of wind. She remained silent during the entire discussion. Splashing. Causing liquid to scatter and make noise. The kids were splashing in the pool. The raindrops were splashing on the window. He enjoyed splashing through the puddles on the street. Squawking. Making a loud, harsh noise, typically used for birds. The parrots were squawking noisily in the trees. The old door made a squawking sound as it opened. The geese were squawking angrily at the intruder. Snapping. Making a sudden, sharp cracking sound. The twig was snapping under his weight. She was snapping her fingers to the beat of the music. The fire was snapping and crackling in the hearth. Snarling. Making an aggressive growl with bared teeth. The dog was snarling at the stranger approaching its territory. The wolf was snarling as it guarded its prey. The cat was snarling with its fur standing on end. Snoring. Making a snorting or grunting sound while asleep. He was snoring loudly, keeping everyone awake. The old man was snoring softly in his chair. She could hear her brother snoring from the next room. Snort. Making a sudden sound through the nose, usually in disgust or amusement. She gave a snort of laughter at the joke. The horse gave a loud snort and shook its head. He made a snort of disgust at the suggestion. Stormy. Characterized by strong winds and usually rain, thunder, lightning, or snow. The sky turned stormy as the clouds gathered. The stormy weather kept them indoors all day. Their relationship was as stormy as the sea during a hurricane. Stuttering. Speaking with involuntary repetition of sounds. He was stuttering nervously during his speech. The child began stuttering when asked a difficult question. The old engine was stuttering before it finally started. Stomping. Walking with heavy, forceful steps. She was stomping around the house in a bad mood. The kids were stomping in puddles after the rain. He came stomping down the stairs in anger. Stamping. Bringing down the foot heavily on the ground. The fans were stamping their feet in excitement. She was stamping her foot in frustration. The workers were stamping the metal into shape. Splat. A sound of something soft or wet hitting a surface. The tomato hit the wall with a loud splat. He stepped in a puddle with a big splat. The paintbrush made a splat on the canvas. Swish. A hissing or rustling sound. The basketball went through the hoop with a swish. Her dress made a soft swish as she walked. The swish of the wind through the trees was calming. Speechless. Unable to speak, especially as a result of strong emotion. She was speechless with shock at the surprise party. The news left him speechless with joy. He stood speechless as he watched the sunset. Tapping. Making a light, repeated noise by striking a surface. She was tapping her pen on the desk while thinking. The rain was tapping on the windowpane. I could hear someone tapping at the door. Tearing. Pulling something apart or to pieces with force. The sound of paper tearing filled the quiet room. She was tearing up the old letters in frustration. The fabric was tearing at the seams. Tinkling. Making a light, ringing sound. The wind chimes were tinkling in the breeze. The tiny bells were tinkling on the cat's collar. The ice cubes were tinkling in the glass. Thudding. Making a dull, heavy sound. The book fell with a thudding sound on the floor. I could hear the thudding of his heartbeat. The heavy boots made a thudding noise as he walked. Thumping. Making a heavy, muffled sound. The bass was thumping in the club. His heart was thumping in his chest from excitement. The thumping of the basketball echoed in the gym. Thundering. Making a loud, rumbling noise. The storm was thundering outside. The thundering applause filled the auditorium. The thundering hooves of the horses approached rapidly. Thwack. A sharp, flat sound made by a hard blow. The ruler hit the desk with a loud thwack. He felt the thwack of the ball against his glove. The arrow hit the target with a satisfying thwack. Ticking. Making a regular, repeated short, sharp sound. The clock was ticking loudly in the silent room. The bomb's timer was ticking down ominously. I could hear the ticking of the old grandfather clock. Tranquil. Free from disturbance, calm. The lake was tranquil in the early morning light. Her voice was tranquil, soothing everyone's nerves. The garden was a tranquil retreat from the busy city. Tumult. A loud, confused noise, especially one caused by a large mass of people. There was a tumult of shouting and cheering in the stadium. The announcement caused a tumult in the crowd. The marketplace was in tumult as vendors and shoppers bargained. Tuneful. Having a pleasing melody. The bird's tuneful song greeted the morning. Her voice was tuneful and enchanting. The tuneful melody lingered in my mind all day. Twittering. Making a succession of chirping sounds. The birds were twittering in the trees. I woke up to the sound of birds twittering outside my window. The twittering of sparrows filled the garden. Uproar. A state of commotion and noise. The announcement caused an uproar in the crowd. The classroom erupted in uproar when the bell rang. There was an uproar of laughter at the joke. Wailing. Making a long, high-pitched cry. The baby was wailing for her mother. The wind was wailing through the gaps in the window. The wailing sirens filled the night with anxiety. Warbling. Singing with a quavering voice. The canary was warbling happily in its cage. She was warbling an old folk tune while cooking. The singer's warbling voice added charm to the performance. Wheezing. Breathing with a whistling sound. He was wheezing after running up the hill. The old man was wheezing with every breath. The dog's wheezing made me worry about its health. Whimpering. Making low, feeble sounds expressive of fear or pain. The puppy was whimpering in the corner. She was whimpering softly after the scary movie. The whimpering child clung to her mother. Whining. Making a high-pitched, complaining sound. The child was whining about not getting ice cream. The dog's whining grew louder as it waited by the door. She was whining about her homework. Whispering. Speaking very softly using breath rather than the vocal cords. She was whispering secrets to her friend. The wind was whispering through the trees. The room was so quiet I could hear them whispering. Whirring. Making a low, continuous, regular sound. The ceiling fan was whirring quietly above. The drone was whirring as it flew overhead. The whirring of the machine was almost hypnotic. Whizzing. Moving quickly through the air with a whooshing sound. The arrow was whizzing past my ear. The car was whizzing down the highway. The drone was whizzing above the trees. Whooping. Giving a loud, excited, or joyful shout. The children were whooping with joy as they ran through the park. The fans were whooping in celebration of the goal. He let out a loud whooping sound when he heard the news. Whistling. Making a high-pitched sound by forcing air through a small opening. The wind was whistling through the cracks in the window. He was whistling a cheerful tune as he walked down the street. The kettle was whistling on the stove. Yell. To shout or scream loudly. She let out a yell when she saw the spider. The coach's yell could be heard across the field. He had to yell to be heard over the noise of the concert. Yell. A high-pitched bark or cry, especially from a small animal. The puppy let out a little yell when it was picked up. The fox made a sharp yell as it was startled. She heard a yell from the bushes as she walked by.